Welcome to the Mythological Unification Theory 101 class. Lesson 1. The core of the mythological unification theory is that humanity has a shared, hidden story, one that connects myth, history, consciousness, religion, and identity, and remembering it matters. This is an introductory class to the mythological unification theory, otherwise known as MUT. It will begin to get you into the story of the Cronides, those that are related to Zeus and Cronus. And it will help you understand how this family is the backbone of all mythologies and religions per my theory. I have currently written 20 books on the subject, written hundreds of blog articles, created hundreds of YouTube videos, and created multiple documentaries on the subject. The research is ongoing. The mystery of it all. Humanity is fascinated by several subjects across the board. We want to know who built the pyramids, who built Göbekli Tepe. What did the ancient Sumerian gods have that gave them knowledge that was called the Mies? Who were the gods and goddesses? Why were there rituals of circumcision? What happened to the gods and goddesses? Why were the gods and goddesses shown as tall and giant-like? Why were there pyramids and mounds all over the world? What happened to Atlantis? Why do we have global flood stories in all ancient pantheons? Why does civilization appear out of nowhere about 12,000 years ago all around the world? Where did the cryptids come from? These are questions that are asked over and over, and it seems we never get full answers to any of them. Well, I have some of the answers. I found the answers through decades of study and research. Finally, I had found answers written in esoteric libraries. The main one out of Harvard University Press, known as the Loeb Library. Let me tell you about what I found and who the ancient gods and goddesses were. Who built the pyramids? Why there are pyramids and mounds all over? What some of the ancient rituals mean? Why these gods and goddesses were shown as giants, and what happened to the gods and goddesses, and why it is all hidden. Let me begin to whet your appetite and then give you the details. These answers are in the mythological unification theory. The mythological unification theory is something that I, Rita Jean Moran, have created to connect all mythologies and religions, past and present, around the world. I've come up with 10 foundational points of the mythological unification theory. There is a hidden human story, and we should care about what was lost, and I'll tell you why it matters. The mythological unification theory will explain our hidden human story. The gods were not abstract, they were real people. One family, many names. The gods were remembered across many cultures. The giants, watchers, and the elder races existed. The world before the flood was a savage place at times. Sacred geography exists. Names such as Tartarus, the Duat, Hyperborea, the underworld, and other lost worlds were actually real places at one point in time. Atlantis and its lost civilization existed. We went from the gods to modern-day religion. The old world became the new world, as the gods were recycled into Semitic religions and modern-day Hinduism and paganism. The hidden human story provides a unified timeline. First, let me tell you how the journey began for me. I have always enjoyed studying ancient cultures, legends, folklore, and mythology, and I have observed that most ancient stories are very similar across all cultures, including stories of floods and giants and little people. I visit many of the places I write about. One day, when I took my family to visit a cave in Texas while we were on vacation, an idea was born inside my mind. The idea further blossomed after visiting another cave in Wisconsin. This idea started out as a set of children's books, and it has since blossomed into finding what I believe is a true and factual story that has never been told before. I began writing The Library Kids after the visit to the caves and after doing years of research and writing for my children's series. I formulated what I call the mythological unification theory. This theory tells the story of what I term the Chronide bloodline and their global travels and civilization of the world between possibly 11,000 to 16,000 years ago, around the time of the global flood. I then wrote a series of new books that were part of my Hidden Human Story series for a more mature audience that tells the graphic details of this family and what they went through. As I began to delve into ancient mythology, I found something that changed my point of view on everything. It came from an ancient Roman scholar named Valerius Maximus, and he worked during the reign of Tiberius. And it further supported my mythological unification theory. Let's talk about what I found. First, the Harvard University Press helped to print the Loeb Library. The Loeb Library was created by James Loeb, who was born in 1867 and passed away in 1933. He was a Jewish German-American banker philanthropist. From the Loeb Library and other libraries such as the British Library and other various books, I began to realize that the god of the flood was also Zeus in ancient mythology, and it all began to come together. I began to understand the story of the ancient family that I call the Chronides and how they changed the world. As I will show you shortly, the Greek god Dionysus is the same god as the Egyptian Osiris, and he was part of this family. Now, many of the books from the Loeb Library were critical in this theory that I created. However, there are plenty of other books that helped, from the British Museum, the Penguin Classics, the Harvard Classics. There are books in the Dumbarton Oaks Library and the Toddy Library, and various other books that are singular and out there on their own that tell the history of the world or the mythology of a certain group of people. The Loeb Library now has over 550 books, and I am still working on reading them all. I am confident in my findings because I have read all of the books of ancient history or mythology in regards to the Chronides from this library. The rest are history books on the Greeks, Persians, and Romans, and that history is well known. Some of the major scholars that are important to the mythological unification theory include Diodorus Siculus, Valerius Maximus, Nonus, Plutarch, Sanchonathan, Snorri Sturluson, Manetho. Other scholars include Macrobius, Virgil, Strabo, Stephanie Dalley, H.D.R. Bo Jubenville, Samuel Noel Kramer, Ovid Hesiod, and many others. Humanity is fascinated with the following subjects: Atlantis, Lemuria, the Minoans, the race of giants, the race of little people, Sumer, Egypt, ancient Americas, Antarctica, Hyperborea, and hidden kingdoms in the mountains or under the ground. These are the stories of old from mythology, legends, and folklore, and they are never going away because these stories are based in truth and they have been written about for thousands of years. Let's start with Egypt. Egypt is one of the major areas of the world that has the secrets to unlocking our hidden human story. The Egyptian pyramids at the Giza necropolis, fascinating to everyone. There is still controversy as to when and how these pyramids were built. Narmer was the pharaoh said to have united Egypt. Prior to that, it was divided into two kingdoms of Lower and Upper Egypt. This ancient king may have gone back to 6,000 years ago. He may also be known as the Pharaoh Scorpion. The Narmer palette depicts the unification of Lower and Upper Egypt under King Narmer. Of utmost importance to the Egyptian pantheon, the gods Isis, Osiris, and Horus are the backbone of ancient Egypt. Set, the red-headed pharaoh, is given the majority of the blame for the death or murder of Osiris, and he is also part of the ancient pantheon of Egypt. In the ancient texts, we find information of how the ancient architecture of the ancient world was constructed and by whom. Diodorus Siculus wrote, "The 8th king, Chemist of Memphis, ruled 50 years and constructed the largest of the 3 pyramids, which are numbered among the 7 wonders of the world." He also discusses how the large stones were conveyed over large distances. Not everybody agrees with this, but this is an incredibly good starting point to begin to understand how things were being built and by whom. In today's modern world, Khufu is credited with building the first pyramid, Khafre with the second pyramid, and Menkaure with the third pyramid. It is not given in the ancient texts that I have been able to find as to who built the sphinxes. There is controversy in regard to the Sphinx as well and its age. Note, there is a temple around the Sphinx and a pathway that led to the Great Pyramid. Thus, it's possible it was built at the same time and connected. Is it possible that there are other buildings under the Great Pyramid and the area of the Giza Plateau? Absolutely. They find many old temples and buildings in ancient Egypt every so often, and many of the current temples and architecture at one point had been buried by sand. So it's possible, and if this goes back to the age of Dionysus Osiris, the buildings in ancient Egypt have to go back at least 11 to 12,000 years per the timeline, as will be shown. Was there a second Sphinx as shown in a stele that is now by the first and remaining Sphinx? Possibly. There are others that believe it is. I have not found anything in the text yet to describe it, but I will keep looking. There are still many temples in ancient Egypt that have mysteries. One of them includes the Edfu temple. It was said to have a small room with many scrolls when it was originally discovered again. Those scrolls are now missing, as I was told by my tour guide when I went to visit Egypt in 2024. Most certainly, the Colossi of Memnon were written about in the ancient texts, and they whistle when the wind blows. Kamombo, another very interesting temple, as I will show you shortly. When I went to Egypt and visited Kamombo, I was lucky enough to see some of the construction opened up with these eye connectors. What I was told was that instead of metal, they would use wood that is now gone. But this building technique of holding these large blocks together with this eye connector is something I've also seen in pictures from ancient Peru. So what was this building technique doing in different locations opposite of each other on the earth and at different time periods? This is yet to be explained. And here is Akhenaten, one of the most controversial pharaohs. He got rid of the pantheons and created monotheism, but he knew who the Aten was, Amun. Could Semitic religion have taken a lesson from his behavior? Quite possibly. The Temple of Hatshepsut, another favorite of tourists. This was a female pharaoh, and after she died, her image was blotted out. But her memory never died, and now we are aware of her accomplishments. We must also note that the Nile River has moved over time. Thus, the whole landscape of ancient Egypt may have been a bit different during the times of Osiris and Isis. There are many ceremonies in ancient Egypt as well as many other civilizations. One of them was the opening of the mouth ceremony. The other was the ritual of circumcision. And it will be shown that this ritual originated with Cronus, who is also known as El in the Phoenician pantheon. So where did the ritual of circumcision come from? Well, it is revealed that it comes from Cronus by Sanchonathan, a Phoenician scholar. Here is some of what he wrote. In the 32nd year of his power and reign, Elis, who is Cronus, having laid an ambuscade for his father Uranus in a certain place in the middle of the earth, and having gotten him into his hands, dismembers him near fountains and rivers. There Uranus was consecrated, and his spirit was separated, and the blood of his parts dropped into the fountains in the waters of the rivers, and the place is shewed even to this day. Continuing on with what Sanchonathan wrote in his History of the Ancient World, he wrote, "Then our historian, after some other things, goes on thus. But Astarte, called the greatest, and Demeroun, entitled Zeus, and Adotus, named the king of gods, reigned over the country by the consent of Cronus. And Astarte put upon her head, as the mark of sovereignty, a bull's head. And traveling about the habitable world, she found a star falling through the air, and she took up and consecrated in the holy island of Tyre, and the Phoenicians say that Astarte is Aphrodite. Cronus, also going about the habitable world, gave to his daughter Athena the kingdom of Attica. And when there happened a plague and mortality, Cronus offered up his only son as a sacrifice to his father Uranus, and circumcised himself, and forced his allies to do the same. And not long afterwards he consecrated after his death another son called Muth, whom he had by Rhea. Him the Phoenicians called Death and Pluto. So he is the one that originated circumcision. That is Cronus. And the mythology goes to say that after he killed his father, Uranus, he castrated his father. And to make amends for that, he circumcised himself and made his followers circumcise themselves. The Tower of Babel is also mentioned by Sanchonathan. He wrote, "They say that the first inhabitants of the earth, glorifying in their own strength and size and despising the gods, undertook to raise a tower whose top should reach the sky, where Babylon now stands. But when it approached the heaven, the winds assisted the gods and overturned the work upon its contrivers, and its ruins are said to be at Babylon. And the gods introduced a diversity of tongues among men, who till that time had all spoken the same language. And a war arose between Cronus and Titan. But the place in which they built the tower is now called Babylon, on account of the confusion of the tongues, for confusion is by the Hebrews called Babel." Now, doesn't that sound familiar? Now, Sanchonathan also gives us information on who the Elim are, and that is a term that people associate with angels in the Bible. Sanchonathan wrote, But the auxiliaries of Elis, who is Cronus, who were called Elohim, as it were, the allies of Cronus, they were so called after Cronus. And Cronus, having a son called Sadidus, dispatched him with his own sword, because he held him in suspicion, and with his own hand deprived his son of life. And in like manner he cut off the head of his daughter, so that all the gods were amazed at the mind of Cronus. End quote. So Cronus was just insane and was killing his children as an example not to mess with him. He also went to war with other adults, which is written about by Diodorus Siculus. But if any place could be pointed to the origin of human sacrifice of children, it goes to the actions of Cronus. Again, the passage says that Cronus offered up his only son, and then afterwards consecrated after his death another son who is called Pluto. We know that Pluto is associated with the underworld and is an ancient Greek god also known as Hades. But here, St. Jonathan is telling you that Pluto was killed as either a baby or a child. Thus, that may explain why he never had children. There are other passages in some of the ancient texts that refer to Zeus as the underworld Hades, and I will explain that down the road as to why he was given that title. But here we are told that Pluto was sacrificed by his father Cronus. So I've just connected Cronus to the Bible. It's clear. I've already shown that sacrifices were introduced by Cronus, and the Titans were the one building the Tower of Babel that was destroyed by the wind. And after that, they changed the languages of humans so that they could never come together. Now, in the Bible that we have today, because it was translated into English, we miss many of the nuances of the way that that book was written. And that includes that there are many names for God that go back to Hebrew, and some of them are El Elyon, Yahweh, Jehovah, Sabazius, and so forth. But the biggest secret here is that these names are not referring to the same person, and it's probably highly likely, based on some of the description, that El Elyon would be Cronus, Jehovah would definitely be Zeus, Sabazius would be Zeus, Yahweh probably is also Zeus, although there may be some overlap with stories of Cronus. But that's the biggest secret, that these ancient gods or patriarchs who allegedly created humanity and civilized it are the godhead of Semitic religion. They just encoded it with various different names so that the average person couldn't figure it out. And once it was translated into English and everything said God this, God that, those nuances were lost. And so it becomes difficult to figure that out. Now let's take a look at Genesis 17 in the Bible. Then God said to Abraham, "As for you, you must keep my covenant, you and your descendants after you for the generations to come. This is my covenant with you and your descendants after you, the covenant you are to keep. Every male among you shall be circumcised. You are to undergo circumcision, and it will be a sign of the covenant between me and you. For the generations to come, every male among you who is 8 days old must be circumcised, including those born in your household, or bought with money from a foreigner, those who are not your offspring, whether born in your household or bought with your money, they must be circumcised. My covenant in your flesh is to be an everlasting covenant. Any uncircumcised male who has not been circumcised in the flesh will be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. Well, I just told you it was Cronus who demanded that his followers circumcise themselves, and it is a ritual that goes back to the fact that he murdered his father and castrated him. In Exodus 13:2, the firstborn are said to belong to God. Consecrate to me all the firstborn, whatever is the first to open the womb among the people of Israel, both man and of beast is mine. Well, what does that mean? Kill them? Sacrifice? There were a whole lot of sacrifices to this God, and we know the person who demanded sacrifices and actually sacrificed his own children was Cronus. Now let's begin to look at the ancient texts that begin to shed light on our hidden human story. And of the ancient Greek writers of mythology, some give to Osiris the name Dionysus, or with a slight change in form, Sirius. One of them, Eumolpus, in his Bacchic hymn, speaks of our Dionysus shining like a star, with a fiery eye in every ray. That is from Diodorus Siculus' Library of History. Now, what I just read may have you scratching your head. How can Osiris be Dionysus? Well, what you have to understand is that these ancient people who lived over 11,000 years ago traveled the world and taught their mystery schools to various people around the world. Every culture has their own name for the same group of gods. Osiris, who is Dionysus, is one of the major players in the mythological unification theory that unlocks our hidden human story. You will see in the ancient texts that the gods had different names, and some of the ancient scholars understood this and actually quoted those names as they wrote about the history of the god or goddess. The next text is major. This was written by Valerius Maximus. The Jews had tried to corrupt Roman values with their cult of Jupiter Sabazius, so the praetor forced them to go back to their home. There you go. They just told you that the Jewish religion includes the god Jupiter Sabazius, who is the equivalent of Zeus. Furthermore, I found a sculpture from the Boston Museum of Fine Arts dated to the 3rd century, and it was named Zeus Sabazius. There is also a picture of Jupiter Sabazius on a carving from the British Library. That one text alone connects the ancient gods and goddesses to modern-day Semitic religion. Further study into Phoenician writings will show that Cronus demanded circumcision and human sacrifice of children. He would be encoded in Semitic religion as El Elyon, or the Most High God. There are multiple names for the Godhead in Semitic religion, including Yahweh and Jehovah and Sabazius. The Els who followed God, El Elyon. Basically, those are code words for the Cronides, who are the ancient gods. This is why these texts are not used in the educational system. It took me decades to find this information, and this class will have a minimal amount of it presented. I have currently written, at the time of this class, 20 books on the subject of the hidden human story, tracking as much of the ancient texts as possible to connect all of the mythologies and modern day religions. Now I have revealed to you that Dionysus is Osiris, and I have revealed the connection between the ancient god Zeus and the Semitic religion of today. Let's meet the family and get to the bottom of our hidden human story.